We are so glad that you're with us today. And again, thank you for joining us for our third session, Literacy Support for Pre-K Leaders webinar series. We're excited about this opportunity to discuss literacy development and how it relates to 3, 4, and 5-year-olds across the state of North Carolina. And as a reminder, every month we're going to host 2 opportunities for you to join our conversation. The sessions will occur within the same month and they're going to cover the same content. But we know that schedules vary and we hope that this 12 o'clock to 1 o'clock time might overlap with nap time for many of you, and that the 3:30 to 4:30 time might be accessible for those of you who follow a school schedule. So we hope you'll share this webinar information with those that were not able to make it to today's session. I wanted to actually, before we really get started too much further, I wanted to introduce myself. I'm Jenny Wilkinson. I am an early education consultant with the Department of Public Instruction. We are in the Office of Early Learning. I serve the North Central region. I'm joined today by my colleagues, several of my colleagues. I have Cameron Amon, who is with us this morning. Do you want to pop on, Cameron, and say good morning really quickly?
Good morning. Thank you guys so much for joining us. I'm excited to be with you guys today. I am the early education consultant for the Piedmont Triad, and I'm going to be presenting with Jenny today.
Awesome. And we have Sarah Morrison, who is another consultant in the state. She is going to be monitoring our chat today. So we're so excited to have Sarah with us as well this afternoon. So thank you both so much. And we'll go ahead and get started. Today we are going to be talking about phonological awareness. We're going to focus on these specific points. We're going to be talking about developmentally appropriate practices. We're going to be defining what phonological awareness is. We're going to be learning the differences between that and phonemic awareness. We know that sometimes there's common misconceptions or confusions around that. We're going to identify the sub-skills that fall within phonological awareness. And we're going to look at some examples of instruction as we think about phonological and phonemic awareness in those early learning classrooms. So as a part of our beginning here, we want to just welcome everyone and have a little time that we can join together. And we're going to today with seeing how your phonological awareness skills are. So what we'd like to do, first of all, is we want to get you engaged. And so we want you to find your chat. So we just want to think about the pictures on the first row here. Let's take a look at our very first picture, the word cupcake. So we know that in a preschool classroom, we use lots of pictures. And phonologically, let's think about how many syllables are in the word cupcake. So if you would just put your answer in the chat there. How many syllables can you clap or can you tap for the word cupcake? That's great. So if you said 2 syllables for the word cupcake, you are great. You can clap it, cupcake. You can tap it, cupcake. You can jump it, cupcake. You can take steps for it. Let's find out about the word elephant. Can you put in the chat how many syllables you can segment into the word elephant? Good. I see 3 popping up a lot. Great. And then our last one, duck. How many syllables are in the word duck? Good. You guys are great. Okay, syllables. Good, good. Now, let's think about our middle row here. So what we want to do is we want to segment these words into onset and rhyme. And this might be a little tricky putting it in the chat. But what we want you to do as we think about the word onset, what we're really thinking about is that very initial sound or that initial cluster of sound when we think about words. I know that Lucy Hart Paulson is having a lot of conversation lately around the word onset, but let's think about the word cheese, okay? How would you segment the word cheese into its onset and then its rhyme? So think about the initial sound and then the rest of the sound. So the initial sound and then the vowel sound on to the end of the word. Excellent. Ch, ease. Good. Ch, ease. Excellent.
Jenny,
Great.
I'm excited to see somebody use their virgules to separate the sounds. That's awesome.
Yes, I saw that too. So kudos, thumbs up for that. Perfect. And what Cameron is referring to are those slash marks. That indicates that we are referring to the sound that we hear, that speech sound that we hear. Excellent. Good. Ease. You guys are great. Now let's think about the next picture, pot. Can you divide or segment this word pot into its onset and rhyme? Good. Ot. Ot. Super. All right, so let's think about this last word, house. Can you segment that word into the initial sound or the onset and then the rest of the word? House. Good. House. Excellent. Good. Thank you. All right, now this last row, we're getting into smaller sounds with our words. And what we want you to do is to think about these words, and we're going to divide them. Now, a lot of times we get our children to tap them out. So if you want to do that, that's fine. The first word is shoe. We want you to tap out, and how many, just put your number in the chat, how many sounds are in the word shoe? We can also say, since we're all adults, we can say how many phonemes are in the word shoe. Good. I'm seeing 2 pop up a lot. Okay, now let's try this next one. This one might be a little bit trickier, okay? So what we want to do is segment this word into individual phonemes or the individual sounds, and the word is grass. Can you segment that one into individual sounds? Grass. How many do you hear?
I'm seeing 4, a 3, another 3, a couple 4s, so kind of mixed on the response.
Good. The reason that why this word is a little tricky is because we have a blend at the beginning, and we know that that sound has 2 sounds actually. So as I tap it out, I will tap it like this. It actually has 4 sounds, so I'm going to tap it out. Ass. So you do have to be careful of that beginning sound because the blend is actually 2 sounds. We know that they're 2 sounds, they're close together, but we can hear both of those sounds when we hear the word ass. So there's 4. All right, now this next one, fox, might be even a little bit trickier. So remember, we are only talking about the sounds or speech sounds. How many speech sounds do you hear in the word fox?
I'm seeing 4 as the most common answer.
This one is a little bit tricky. This one is a little bit tricky because we are proficient readers. We have moved, we have these skills as in our repertoire. We have this word imprinted in our letterbox that's in the back of our brain. And so it's hard not to think about the print when someone's asking us to think about the sounds because what we do is we typically go to the visual representation, but we're thinking about the speech sounds. So there are actually 4 speech sounds in the word fox. So I'm going to tap it out for you. It actually has 4 speech sounds. So we know the first sound, we hear as that medial sound. Now, we know because we know how to spell fox, and it's kind of it's really difficult for us to unsee that. But the last phonemes that we hear in fox actually are so it's 2 sounds, 2 phonemes that would be represented by the X there. So there are actually 4 sounds in the word fox, and that definitely gets tricky. And we're going to talk about that a little bit further. So pat yourself on the back. Job well done. As we do think about the brain today and learning to read, we know that there is settled research that has shown that while language or learning to speak is natural to the human brain, learning to read is not. Now, learning to speak is natural, but not learning to read. Learning to read involves connecting 2 sets of the brain regions that are already present in infancy. Now, the object recognition system and the language circuit. Now, this is support through neuroimaging. Okay, so if you look at the brain there, you'll see that we have the front part of the brain is one of the major regions of the brain, and it has to work together to achieve reading with the occipital lobe and the visual word area form. So all of those areas have to work together. Now, the processing systems engaged by the reading brain develop pathways as reading skills are learned. The processing systems and connecting pathways form an extensive circuit which transforms the brain as humans learn to read. So it actually changes the anatomy of the brain as children learn to read. Reading instruction forms a pathway between those two areas, the frontal lobe and the occipital lobe, which ultimately results in reading. Now, the pathway has to be formed by intentionality, and research has shown us that we build that pathway by explicitly teaching children to recognize graphemes, which are our printed letters, and how they can easily turn them into speech sounds. Now, all other aspects of reading depend on this crucial step. So phoneme manipulation takes place in the frontal lobe. And remember that we're born with that ability to learn to speak and acquire spoken language. This is where the process takes place. Now, again, toward the back of the brain in the temporal lobe is the visual word area. Now, this is where we take in letter symbols, the graphemes, those shapes that make up the letters, and we begin to process their shapes independently and then together as word forms. Now, we're not born knowing print language. The graphemes have to be explicitly taught through many, many exposures. The brain has to complete the big job of connecting the letters, those are the printed letters, the graphemes, and the phonemes, which again are our speech sounds. Now that connection has to travel back and forth from the frontal lobe to the temporal lobe across a superhighway called the angular gyrus. Connections must be explicitly taught, and repeated exposures and opportunity for practice and application must be provided. Now, that's a lot of information about the brain, but the important takeaway here is that according to DeHaan, now he's a neuroscientist, and he's done decades worth of research in the brain. And in his book, Reading in the Brain, we want to remember that cognitive neuroscience teaches us that is only one way that the human brain becomes a reading brain, and that is forming that circuitry in the brain that acts as that superhighway between the letters that we see and the speech sounds those letters or letter strings represent. So again, intentionality, and that there is only one way that the brain becomes a reading brain. So let's dive into a theoretical model, the simple view of reading. Sometimes it's referred to as the SVR. Now, this is a formula introduced by Goog and Tumner in 1986. So this is research, obviously, that has been around a long time. The SVR formula demonstrates that reading comprehension is a product of decoding. That's the word recognition and language comprehension, which they're separate but necessary skills. Now, if either area is weak, the product will be a reading comprehension ability. So if I'm looking at decoding and I have less than 100% ability to decode, and I times that by 100% language comprehension, I'm still going to end up with less ability to comprehend reading. Any piece of this, if you don't have full capacity or full ability, you will have a weakness in your reading comprehension. So weakness in either decoding or linguistic comprehension will reduce the ability for students to reach the ultimate goal of reading, which is comprehension. This is Scarborough's rope. I'm sure probably most of you, or hopefully most of you, have seen this before. This was a model, a theoretical model by Dr. Hollis Scarborough, and she created this in 2001. And she created it because she wanted to show a metaphor of a rope with its many strands. She wanted to explain the complexity of reading to parents and educators. Now, this model illustrates the progressive interweaving of these skills needed for proficient reading. Hollis Scarborough's rope model breaks the skilled reading process down into language comprehension and word recognition skills. And you can see that denoted with the red strands and the blue strands. Now, however, each of these two areas is broken down even further into skill strands that comprise each component. The word recognition portion is made up of phonological awareness, decoding, and sight recognition skills. Those three strands weave together and lead to fluent and automatic word recognition. Now, these are finite skills. These are skills that we want to see developed by the end of third grade. Again, however, if even one of these strands is frayed or broken, then the word recognition is not strong. Likewise, the language comprehension portion of the rope is made of strands such as background knowledge, vocabulary, language structures, verbal reasoning, and literacy knowledge. Now, those are woven together and they build increasingly strategic comprehension skills as long as all the strands are intact and strong. And so, like a true rope, if one strand is frayed or broken, then the integrity of the entire rope is compromised. So, if one or more of these strands in the reading rope is broken, skilled reading is compromised. So, what we're going to look at now is another model. And this image depicts the essential components of reading instruction based on the National Reading Panel report and ongoing research that has emphasized the importance of oral language in reading development. You'll notice that speaking and listening have been placed in the center to depict the receptive and expressive features of oral language. Oral language is where that journey to reading development begins. The five components surround speaking and listening in a connected manner to demonstrate how they are all interconnected in achieving a successful reading. Now, remember, we want to remember that we're not born with brains wired to read, and when we foster literacy, speaking and listening or oral language is that entry point into literacy instruction with our young learners. So we want to start each of our pre-K sessions together, grounding our work in developmentally appropriate practice. Now, we found principle number 7 and 8 particularly relevant to today's session. It's important to note that we also see that these principles reflected in the body of research referred to as the science of reading. So our first principle is number 7. Children learn in an integrated fashion that cuts across academic disciplines or subject areas. Because the foundations of subject area knowledge are established in early childhood, educators need subject area knowledge, an understanding of the learning progressions within each subject area, and pedagogical knowledge about teaching each subject area's content effectively. The other principle that we found relevant was number 8. Development and learning advance when children are challenged to achieve at a level just beyond their current mastery, and when they have many opportunities to reflect on and practice newly acquired skills. In each of the early literacy foundations, letters emphasizes the progressions or stages that children go through as they develop from birth through kindergarten. So in Unit 3 of Early Childhood Letters Training, the progression of phonological skills such as rhyming and phonological awareness are presented to emphasize how the skills build on one another and how teachers can then scaffold learning as children move through the stages.
I'm going to jump into the pieces of phonological awareness. In your Letters Early Childhood Manual, some of the sessions spend a lot of time developing the PH, the foundations of phonological awareness and reading, and what that means for acquisition of reading skills later in our childhood years. And so when we're developing those foundations, we're looking at phonological processing, and it begins before birth. Jenny talked about that when she was looking at the reading brain and that frontal part of your brain. That oral language will naturally develop. Then babies are going to develop phoneme sensitivity. And then those phonological skills are going to develop through that birth into pre-K, from awareness to purposeful manipulation. So their babies and early childhood learners are going to start moving from recognizing sounds and hearing sounds to knowing that those sounds carry meaning, and then taking that meaning into manipulation of sounds as they develop later, and how that begins to form words and sentences, and then those words and sentences become to carry meaning. Then as we move through, older preschoolers, they're going to learn to make connections between those sounds and letters, again, giving those meaning. I'm going to read these two quotes for you. The first one comes from page 89 in your early childhood manual. It says, "Every word you hear, say, read, or write goes through the phonological system. Developing and enhancing children's phonological skills is a vital aspect of literacy learning." So I'm going to let you think on that for just a second. And then on page 97, it says, "Research has shown that phonological processing is the most prominent and enduring weakness in people with reading and spelling problems." So what that's telling us is, as we look at our kindergarten students, our first grade students, our second grade students, and our third grade students, there is a direct correlation between our pre-K children's ability in their phonological processing and how well they have mastered those skills to how well students are and how proficient students are as readers in third grade. There's a direct correlation and prediction with that. And so in the chat, I want to get you guys involved a little bit off of those two quotes. I want you to drop in the chat, how do you intentionally support the development of children's phonological skills in your classroom, in your school, or in your center? Ooh, constant communication, I like it. Leaning into that oral language, good. Oral reading activities, yes. And everyday activities, constant communication, reading books, yes. Some other examples that we could intentionally support that development would be involving students and just exposing students to nursery rhymes, rhyming songs, simple poems, rhyming games and chants, syllable clapping, highlighting initial sounds. These are all things that you guys probably already do in your classroom every day, both incidentally through your centers and through conversation and read alouds, but also explicitly through some of your whole group and small group instruction as well. So a couple brief definitions just to give you some background knowledge about phonological awareness. Phonological awareness is an umbrella term, and it means to attend, discriminate, remember, and manipulate sounds at the sentence, word, syllable, and phoneme level. And that phoneme level is going to be that smallest unit of sound. Within phonological awareness, we're going to move through a series of skills that we do not want to teach in isolation, but we want to teach simultaneously to ultimately reach that phoneme or individual sound level where we address it as phonemic awareness. And phonemic awareness is the ability to notice, think about, and manipulate the individual phonemes or individual sounds in words. It's the ability to understand sounds in spoken language and how they work together. This term is used to refer to the highest level of phonological awareness, and that comes directly from Kilpatrick. So in phonological awareness, there's a staircase of skills, but like I mentioned just before, we don't want these skills to be taught in silos. We don't want you to move from rhyme and wait till mastery and then go to alliteration. We want these skills to be taught simultaneously as we move towards from larger chunks of words to smaller chunks of words and then into those phonemes. So this graphic depicts a progression from left to right as these skills increase in difficulty. The skills also begin with whole words, moving to word parts, into word chunks, and ending at the phonemic awareness level where individual sounds are manipulated. Graphemes, and as Jenny explained earlier, graphemes are our letter symbols. Those are not included in phonological awareness. There is a time where we take pictures and printed material to match rhyming word pictures and beginning sounds. But at this point, when we're just working with the oral sound pieces, we are not attaching those graphemes or letters to those sounds yet. So if we look at that staircase, we're going to start with rhyme, move through alliteration, sentence segmentation. So we're breaking those longer sentences down into individual words, into syllabication, where we're breaking those individual words into syllables, onset and rhyme, which we briefly touched on during our welcoming and inclusion, where we're looking at that beginning sound. And then that rhyme is from the vowel sound to the end of the word. And then moving into those individual sound manipulation skills as in phonemic awareness. And again, I just want to remind you guys that these skills are not taught in silos, but as a progression simultaneously. Students do not need to master one skill in order to be receiving instruction in the next skill. And ultimately, our goal is to grow our students to become fluent readers, where they can accurately and automatically manipulate the phonemes and read words as they decode. And so there are two pop-ups in here just as a reminder of onset and rhyme and phonemes. So what we've done on this next slide is lay it out so that it is color-coded, just like our staircase of skills. And we've provided examples of instructional questions or instructional activities that you might hear when you walk into an early childhood classroom. So as you read through this chart, I want you to keep in mind in pre-K, phonological awareness focuses on rhyming words, alliteration, initial sound, sentence segmenting, and syllables. Letters Early Childhood states that letter naming and initial sound isolation are the two best predictive indicators of later literacy learning. So taking that back to the previous slide where I mentioned that phonological awareness has a direct correlation with success of reading in our third grade students. I'm giving you some general milestones for our typically performing students. As with any developmental progression, it's important to understand where children are demonstrating their knowledge, skills, and abilities when planning for future instruction and next steps for those individual children. On page 40 of the Letters for Early Childhood Educators Manual, these milestones that you see briefly described on the slide are described in further detail about phonological development. So you'll notice 4-year-olds should be generally understood by others and have learned to say the sounds sh, j, ch, and ul, in addition to sounds listed for 2- and 3-year-olds. And you'll notice that we also included some of those 5-year-old sounds, but keep in mind these sounds developments do not fully become developed until years 8 and 9 as they move into 3rd and 4th grade. So we are going to share some quotes, and I'm going to give you guys time to read them quietly instead of listening to me read them. All 4 of our quotes come from page 100 of the Letters for Early Childhood Educators Manual. And there are also some additional quotes about why phonological and phonemic awareness is important. So I'm going to let you, Jenny's going to pop them in and give you about 10 seconds or so to read each one. And then we will have a little bit of discussion around that. So this one is lending, having us think about children with underdeveloped phonological awareness skills in preschool, just having that correlation to our reading in 3rd grade. If our students are having trouble learning how to decode sounds in written words, they're having trouble segmenting them when they hear them as well. Our struggle and blend and chunk words instead of being able to segment them into those individual sounds. So being able to do that orally and auditorily is going to directly lend itself to our skills in later education. All right, so our phonological awareness skills in kindergarten children, they have been identified as one of the best predictors of reading achievement between kindergarten and 2nd grade. So when we're thinking about analysis tasks, which include later developing manipulation skills such as deletion of sounds, counting, sound substitutions, adding sounds to words, this has the strongest correlation for literacy development, and strong phonological awareness skills help pave the way for learning to read and write. And so when we're thinking about we know that in our North Carolina standards, morphology does not become a specifically taught standard until 3rd grade. But this piece of it, when we're adding and deleting sounds and adding prefixes or suffixes, and even just adding S to a noun to make it plural, your students are already participating in morphology instruction in your pre-K classrooms. Children that are stronger with playing with rhymes, syllables, and speech sounds and have opportunities to practice those are generally become better readers more quickly. And this is because these skills enable them to learn the alphabetic principle, which leads to phonics. So these are those beginning skills that are going to start leading to skills within phonics of attaching that phoneme, the letter sound, to the grapheme, our letter symbol. Last quote, it may be more effective to provide our phonological awareness instruction in preschool rather than waiting until children are in kindergarten, because teaching phonological awareness positively impacts speech production, early literacy, reading accuracy, reading comprehension, and spelling. And so if we think back to the circle that Jenny shared with us at the beginning in those big five, while phonological and phonemic awareness is part of that, this all goes back to that glue of oral language. And then when we're thinking about glue as well, as we transition here in a little bit into our phonics, the phonological and phonemic awareness really is that glue that attaches those sounds to the graphemes, to those letters. And so if I cannot manipulate, identify, segment those sounds, I'm really going to struggle when I start making that connection through that superhighway in my brain to those graphemes and letters. In the next couple of slides, we're going to go through, we've talked about what you could hear in the classroom, but we're also going to talk about what it could look like in the classroom. And so phonological awareness skills are taught directly and explicitly. This, as a reminder, this instruction does not include graphemes or the letter symbols. All of our modeling, instruction, and practice is done orally and auditorily, manipulating words, word parts, phonemes, and sounds. And then instruction and practice can be supported with pictures or manipulatives. So when we're talking about our rhyming, we might have some rhyming words out there, or we might have, when we're segmenting syllables or even sounds, we might have some chips or bears or different manipulatives we might be able to use. And so a teacher's use of nursery rhymes, songs, and poems are a playful, fun, and impactful way for young children to imitate rhythmic word patterns and begin to build those phonological awareness skills. So rhyming is the ability to match and produce words with same endings. Teachers explicitly model this concept and provide ample opportunities for children to practice identifying and producing rhymes. And so we're going to start out by providing students the opportunity to identify rhymes. Can they say cat and hat, or cat, hat, and bat rhyme? And then as they begin to build mastery in identifying rhymes, then we're going to move to a more difficult skill of generating those rhymes. I have log, dog. What's another word that might rhyme with these two words? And your student may respond with frog. And there may be some picture support and scaffolding there for them if they need it. Is the ability to hear and recognize when words have the same beginning or initial sounds. This skill should be directly and explicitly modeled and taught. And again, children need ample opportunities to practice this acquisition of the skill and the ability. And so we want to make sure that when we're going through the alliteration piece, that we are being very specific in helping students understand that beginning sound and making sure that we are articulating those sounds correctly and making sure that our speech pronunciation of those sounds is correct as students begin to hear those sounds as well. Using picture puzzles can also help children bridge between concrete and abstract thinking. It can help them isolate the beginning sound in spoken word. And then, as we talked about very briefly at the beginning, we want to remind you, as you see in these speech bubbles, you'll see the slash marks on either side of the letters. Those slash marks are called virgules. And those virgules indicate that when we as the teacher are providing instruction, maybe from a particular program that we're using or lesson plans, that those virgules are indicating that we are saying the sound. Because remember, in phonological awareness, we are not showing the students the grapheme or the letter symbol yet. We are just saying those sounds. And so those virgules or slashes indicate that there is of a sound. Another piece that's really important as we are providing direct and explicit instruction in our pre-K classrooms in phonological and phonemic awareness, I just mentioned, is that correct pronunciation of our letter sounds. And so what we want to make sure that we're doing as teachers is we're modeling appropriate and correct articulatory features. And so what that means is teachers should be explicitly modeling what their mouth is doing, what the shape of the mouth looks like, where is their tongue in their mouth, what is their voice doing? Is their voice on and you can hear it and feel it in your voice box? Or is their voice off and it's just sound that, it is just air that is moving to produce those sounds? While we recognize that there is a developmental continuum for speech development and sound development, we want to make sure that on the front end, we are modeling those appropriate and correct articulatory features. We're showing students through and using mirrors with ourselves, and also providing students with the opportunity to use mirrors and see their mouths as well, especially thinking through this cohort of early childhood students that have come up in a time of COVID, when our speech development and our oral language development has often been masked. And so they haven't had as many opportunities to see appropriate and correct modeling of those articulatory features of sound. And then we have a couple other just reminders of ways over here on the right side of the slide of other pieces you may see in the classroom. One of them being word chains. And so if teachers are practicing with word chains, they're giving a student a word and they are saying the word, not showing the word. And they may say, my word is cat. What's my word? And the student responds, cat. And the teacher will change one sound in that word. So they may say, my word is cat. I change my beginning sound to what's my new word? And the students would respond, hat. I change my beginning sound to p. What's my new word? And the students respond, pat. But it's really important to remember in word chain activities that we're only changing one phoneme or one sound at a time, and that we are not showing the students the words at this point. One more slide in phonological awareness. As your teachers in your classrooms are moving towards more advanced phonemic awareness activities and manipulating those individual sounds, you might see towards the end of your pre-K years that we are going to start manipulating with chips or bears and moving those bears in Alcona boxes to represent those sounds as they're segmenting. When we move into our guiding documents, we're going to make some connections for you guys as it relates to phonological and phonemic awareness specifically. This graphic was created by Amy Gear in Guilford County, and it just provides you guys some guidance on when you're going to see these skills talked about in instruction provided from letters for your classroom teachers. And with the oral language, you're going to see that in Unit 2, Sessions 3 through 6. And your phonological awareness and phonemic awareness, you'll begin digging really deep into during Units 3, Sessions 7 and 8. So we wanted to make some connections to North Carolina Foundations for Early Learning and Development for you guys. The developmental progression of phonological awareness is represented here, and it's represented in our Foundations document in Goal 11. Goal 11 aligns to information provided to letters professional development related to the phonological awareness in pre-K. So as mentioned in Table 3.1 of letters on page 93, and in Foundations, phonological awareness develops during those preschool years. And within our Foundation document, it gives you an idea of what that looks like through the lens of North Carolina instruction and how that aligns to our letters instruction as well. And so then we also have our literacy instruction standards. The LIS for preschool is a resource developed by our Office of Early Learning to specifically support preschool teachers in the area of literacy. They are written as core practices that the teachers will intentionally integrate into their daily instruction, and they will have to give opportunities for children to engage in high quality early literacy experiences every day. Just as a review on what we've covered today in phonological awareness, this comes directly from the LIS in that alignment, and I think it serves as a really good review for what we've talked about. And just keep in mind, these are not standards, but practices that teachers should be using to engage students every day. And as we wrap up, we want to give you guys an opportunity to reflect and think about how leaders in schools or leaders in your centers can support teachers in promoting phonological awareness and phonemic awareness practices within your classrooms. From the information shared during today's session, in the chat, I want you to drop what ways Can you support phonological and phonemic practices and development within your school or center? I like it, Brenda. Sing, sing, sing. Yes. And being intentional with those songs, the kids aren't necessarily noticing that they're being provided direct phonological and phonemic instruction. They're just having fun with their songs. Focus on oral language development through songs, read aloud, wordplay, etc. Rhyme, songs, talk with children. Yes, Wendy, that is huge. Your oral language development hinges on that through robust conversations within the classroom, within the school, within your read alouds. Perfect. And then Jenny's going to pop up a couple of ideas for you guys to take back with you as well. So we want to make sure that we're ensuring that explicit phonological awareness, instruction, and assessment are part of the daily classroom schedule. So thinking through, we're having that direct instruction, but also indirect, implicit instruction. Encourage, just like you guys, encourage the use of poems and rhyming throughout the day. Collaborate with teachers to ensure that instructional materials are developmentally appropriate and follow a scope and sequence. And then I think it was Wendy, just like you said, encourage teachers to incorporate children's name as written labels throughout the classroom. And that's going to be more as we shift into that phonics piece. But it's definitely, as we start working with our instruction, incorporating children's names into that direct explicit instruction as well. Our next session is going to focus, that is going to occur on January 17th from 12 to 1 and January 18th from 3:30 to 4:30. This last page takes you to our Office of Early Learning Pre-K resources, where we have crosswalks to support your foundations, your teaching strategies gold, your kindergarten standard course of study, and beginning to align that with letters. We have foundations unpacking guides and read aloud support, play to read activities for literacy development. There is a PLC for pre-K teachers that is now available, sessions 1 through 9. That's linked there. And then our literacy at home link is there as well for activities to share with caregivers at home.